and welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English studios. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the latest business news headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. Coming up, Saudi Arabia revises the 2024 foreign direct investment figure upwards to $31.7 billion US, surpassing targets. While strong inflows are seen as a clear sign of international investor confidence in the kingdom's legislative and economic reforms. Fresh data from a survey carried out by Riyad Bank points to steady non-oil private sector growth. We'll be speaking to Riyad Bank's chief economist and asking what's driving the growth. Plus, the Global Water Expo wraps up in Riyadh. That brought together expertise from right across the globe. Sustainable water infrastructure is a key element of Vision 2030. We're going to jump right into our main story. Fresh revised data shows that Saudi Arabia attracted a near record sum from overseas investors during the year 2024, far surpassing the annual target. Well, foreign direct investment reached 119 billion riyals last year. That's just over $30 billion US, considerably more than was previously reported. While manufacturing, trade, construction and financial services all saw strong activity, all these results are seen as a clear sign of investor confidence in the kingdom's legislative and economic reforms. Ali, thanks a lot for taking the time to speak to us. Clearly good news, FDI up across the region, but Saudi Arabia really leading the way. Some might say this proves that plans to diversify the economy are really paying dividends. What are your thoughts?
Tom, the question over the last few years has been, can Saudi Arabia really diversify away from the oil economy and build the kind of global economic powerhouse that it is proposing to do? And it's been quite a blunt question. You know, you've heard versions of this across many of the conversations that relate to the various sectors being built, from automotive to sports to entertainment and such. This is a very significant event because, of course, this is a clear demonstration that the efforts that have been underway under Vision 2030 are proving useful. And, you know, just a few months ago, Tom, actually, you and I were speaking about this, the FDI numbers being estimated around $20 billion, just north of, and, you know, the expectation being that perhaps this would be somewhat of a decline. Under the Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia has a FDI inflows target of around $100 billion US. And if we go back a couple of years, I mean, the peak that Saudi Arabia has hit is usually around 23 billion. So, you know, to reach the $39 billion mark is quite a sizable jump. And it's not by accident. I mean, we've talked about many of the industrial reforms that are taking place and the many initiatives and programs underway. We've seen 600 plus regional headquarters established in Riyadh or in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, when you have global enterprises establishing their headquarters in a region, it's not simply an injection of capital or resources and such. There are second-degree consequences, flow-on consequences to the availability of talent. There's mentorship available to the young, very educated population. There's new knowledge in the region. There is, you know, that fact in itself, or the existence of those headquarters in themselves, are an attractor to further enterprise. So what you see is a compounding effect. And you know, we've often spoken about the fact that, and I'm, you know, very often you hear me say that there are some challenges in various aspects of the national investment strategy, or you know, some challenges that may be perceived from some of the economic indicators at times. But if we look at the story as a whole, the leading indicators, you know, they are telling a positive story. And, you know, these numbers are the result of that. It is showing that the economy is heading in the right direction. There is still a way to go. We're about halfway through Vision 2030 being in motion, but it's all heading in the right direction.
Okay, I don't know if you're able to tell us, but are we able to see where that FDI is coming from and which countries appear to be the main sources of foreign investment? Ali?
It's quite a diversified mix. I mean, China has been for a long time and perhaps will continue to be one of Saudi Arabia's largest trading partners. But the obvious culprits, you know, China, US, India, there is substantial growth in a lot of the trade with the BRICS nations. I mean, just earlier this week, we saw a significant pipeline of investments actualized with the UK, with the forums that have been underway in partnership with the UK. So it's quite diversified. And, I think in this discussion, it's also important to know, I mean, Saudi Arabia has really taken a neutral stance across the globe and worked hard to maintain relationships and friendships with as many of its counterparts across the globe as possible. And whilst there are some leading players like the ones that we've just discussed, I mean, our friend Trump certainly brought a posse with him, so to speak, when he arrived a couple of months ago, and there was a lot of trade that took place then. There's been a lot of flow-on investments and partnerships that have taken place. But, all of that being said, Saudi Arabia is open to the world, and I think this mix is going to continue to diversify, and we'll see new entrants kind of pick up on the ranks.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like 2025 FDI inflows will be even higher than they were in 2024. I mean, is that sort of roughly where you'd see things heading?
We can certainly speculate. I mean, the Saudi strategy has been such that if you look at the psychology of the sovereign fund or some of the semi-sovereign bodies or even the private sector, it has been to establish footholds in industries by building what I would call a spine, building core entities or platforms that establish distribution, manufacturing, and such. And these things pay dividends over time, and they do compound in value. So if that is any indication, and the scale of development that's taken place across the sectors is any indication, then I think it's correct to speculate that 25 will be a substantial year.
Okay, well, we'll be speaking to you in just a moment. We'll also be talking a bit more about the boosting of economic ties between Saudi and the UK. But for now, thanks very much indeed, Ali. Now, according to a new survey carried out by Riyad Bank, Saudi Arabia's non-oil private sector growth was steady during the month of August. Business activity grew slightly faster during the previous month. The seasonally adjusted Riyad Bank Saudi Arabia Purchasing Managers Index rose to 56.4 in August, well above the 50 mark, indicating growth, which has been driven by multiple factors, amongst them further gains in employment. Well, let's get more on this and get to understand those numbers a little bit better. We can speak to Naif Alghaith, who is the chief economist at Riyad Bank. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Let's talk through the Purchasing Managers Index. Just remind us what it is and what this latest data tells us.
Thank you very much, Tom. Yes, as you said, the PMI or Purchase Manager Index of Riyad Bank recorded 56.4, which is an expansionary. What it means that the economy, when compared month to month or month to month, it's growing. When you are above 50, it means that you are growing than what it was. And when you are below 50, then the economy is contracting. Luckily, with this, which represent the non-oil economy, our economy is still growing and mainly pushed by the output, employment, and also the new orders.
Okay, tell us a bit more. I mean, as we've been saying, I mean, the number's only up very fractionally, isn't it, from the month before? But this upward trajectory, you mentioned a couple of factors there. Which is perhaps the most significant?
Sure. So the PMI, as you're very well aware, that it consisted of 12 sub-indices, each index that influence the PMI. The highest share of the one that has more weight is the new orders. So anything happens to the new orders, that it would influence the PMI. And this is what we have seen right now. The new orders recorded above 60, and it has influenced the index. The new orders were pushed by the increased demand. 28% of the survey responses indicated there is an increase in demand. Also, they indicated that there is an increase in export and also the project related to infrastructure and the increase in the clients in the GCC area.
Okay, and employment is continuing to grow across Saudi Arabia. And I understand that is a key part of the growth. Could you just tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. We saw last observation for the Q1 unemployment that has been reduced way below the 7%, which was the target for the Vision 2030. And now we have a new target for 5%. On the other hand, the PMI shows the employment, whether the employment is increasing or not. We're still in the expanding territory. We recorded above 54. And still it's growing. We have been seeing, despite the increase in the cost of employment, the employment is increasing. Mainly is pushed by the demand, the strong demand, competition, and also many of the companies report that they are willing to have more employments to meet these demands and to also to have a higher or qualified employee to produce, to be able to produce products that is to meet the client's satisfaction.
And I don't know if it goes into this level of detail, but you're able to see which sectors you're seeing the growth of employment in. I mean, I know they're all non-oil, but any sectors that stand out for employment growth?
Sure. We don't have so many sectors, but some of the clients, they indicate which they have seen the growth. They continue to mention related projects. They continue to mention the infrastructure, also a related project, and also they have indicated the manufacturing as well.
Just tell us a bit about how you carry out this survey. What's the sort of the methodology? How does it work?
Sure. So basically, we are in partnership with S&P Global, and they send a survey to many number of firms. They are non-oil, obviously, companies. And the survey asks a question with the three identified answers. Either is your as your firm is growing, for example, if we just saying yes, if it's growing, that means 1. If it's not growing, that is 0. If it's not, if it's a constant, that is 0. If it's contracting, that is -1. So with a number of so many firms, then we'll be able to have the number 0 equal to 50, which is the balance, -1, then we can calculate it and get this number. So whenever you have a number above 50, which means 0, then the economy or the firms or the sample we are having, it is growing. And therefore, it reflects in the PMI. The good things, if you see the PMI trend, always moves with the non-oil, and the PMI is ahead of the non-oil GDP, and always PMI is ahead of the GDP. GDP calculation is more complicated. It requires times and always comes a quarter behind. So the good thing, we have observation 3 months ahead of the GDP, and we'll be able to paint a picture of what's going to be the expected reading.
Okay, and are you able to see how Saudi Arabia is doing compared to other countries in this region?
Sure. Well, our index is focused in Saudi Arabia, but at the same time, we can look at so many indices, the PMI of other regions. We continue to see our economy is growing, and that is also parallel with the PMI. One of the good readings, we can also look at the future output, and this shows us the confidence in the economy, and we can compare this also to other economy. Other things also indicate, for comparison, when you look at also the export, and it is expanding. And many of the survey participants also, they indicate about how they are doing with their clients from the region. And this will give us also a good comparison with the neighboring country.
So how is Saudi Arabia doing compared to its neighbors?
Doing very well. So we saw right now also the flash GDP, and it shows 3.9 for overall the GDP. For the oil GDP, it's 4.7. This is above the expectation of the IMF. The IMF is expecting 4.5 for this year. I expect we will record above the 4.5, from 5 to 4.5 5. Q1, we have recorded 4.9, so the trajectory of the non-oil economy is quite impressive.
Okay, and just lastly, when it comes to overall business confidence, what are you seeing when you look at the numbers and you look at the survey results?
As we said before, it's positive. The business sentiment is still indicating in the positive trajectory. We continue to see the confidence, and also one of the sub-indices is the future output, and the future output also right now is recording it's way better than the previous month. This also reflected by the increase in demand. Businesses also indicated some of the challenges they have faced. They have also indicated the increase in purchase cost or the input costs. Yet with the competition and the prices, they still manage to grow.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We really appreciate you speaking to us. Always a pleasure. Naif Alghaith, Chief Economist at Riyad Bank. Thank you for your time, sir. Okay, let's bring Ali Raza, the Chief Investment Officer at Haytham & Company, back into the conversation. Ali, just listening in there to Naif, and we've spoken to him before, haven't we, the two of us, about that survey. But it really does seem that he's optimistic with regards to the latest PMI survey that's been carried out for the month of August, well above the all-important 50 mark, because that indicates growth.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, the conversation we were just having around, the FDI numbers, these are all different sides of the same coin, essentially. I mean, there is a very clear and substantial amount of momentum in the economy. There is improved sentiment. Unemployment is at a record low rate. There is a lot more labor participation, especially as over the last couple of years. We've seen an uprise in female work participation. There are, as we said earlier, regional headquarters that have been established that are creating a substantially larger volume of opportunities. I mean, all in all things combined, it is not surprising. And I think this is yet another consequence of the strategy that's been put in place to diversify away from the oil economy. So this is now all showing the results in action.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Ali. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Let's take a look at some of the other stories from the past week. According to the Saudi Central Bank, point-of-sale transactions across the kingdom rose some 17.8% in the last week of August. That sharp increase in consumer spending is seen as an indicator of robust economic momentum, while the F&B sector remains the largest spending category, with the capital Riyadh dominating point-of-sale transactions, followed by Jeddah. Saudi Arabia has sold $5.5 billion of US dollars of international bonds in a two-part sukuk, or Islamic debt sale. That $5.5 billion was made up of $2.25 billion in 5-year note and a $3.25 billion 10-year bond. Well, investors placed around $17.5 billion US dollars in orders, indicating strong demand. Well, this marks the kingdom's first international sukuk based on an ijara structure. FedEx Corporation is the latest international company to inaugurate a regional office in Riyadh. This in a move seen as its commitment to the kingdom as a key logistics hub in the Middle East. Well, FedEx has also secured an economic license to operate as a foreign air carrier in Saudi Arabia. And the flag carrier of neighboring Qatar has announced that it's launching direct flights next month from Doha to Red Sea International Airport on Saudi Arabia's west coast. Well, Qatar Airways says it will operate 3 flights a week. The Red Sea tourism destination, part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plan for economic development and diversification, is expected to attract 1 million visitors every year once it's completed. Now, Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom are on track to boost economic ties with some $485 million US dollars worth of joint investments. Well, those investments, which were announced on the sidelines of last week's Great Futures Summit in London, will create dozens of jobs in both countries, with energy and financial services amongst the sectors set to gain. Well, that summit was attended by the Saudi Minister of Commerce, His Excellency Dr. Majid Al-Kassabi. Well, the UK has a new ambassador to Riyadh, Stephen Hitchen, who's been making quite a buzz on social media for his fluent Arabic skills. He has also been hailing the strength of the relationship and the mutual respect between the two kingdoms. Well, here with me is Ali Raza, the Chief Investment Officer at Haytham and Company. Ali, we were talking about this at the beginning, and as you say, a lot of the stories today have got quite a lot of communality and linkages. I mean, just specifically on the UK, I mean, there's a long list of examples of economic cooperation between the UK and Saudi Arabia. I mean, one example that springs to mind is the fact that the PIF has completed a 15% acquisition of Heathrow Airport, but that's just one of many, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, the relationship in the trade context spans back many decades, but much like many of the other regions in the world, it's starting to heat up now and becoming very interesting, not only because of the potential for foreign investment flows into Saudi Arabia, but, you know, Saudi Arabia naturally, like any developing and advanced economy, has an appetite and a real strategy to enable export of their industries as well. So Al-Fanar is one of the groups that, is setting up operations in Saudi Arabia, particularly involved in energy and mobility. And they're known, obviously, within Saudi Arabia for being involved in several high-profile energy projects and many of the sort of infrastructure projects. But now you're starting to see the expansion of enterprises like this into different parts of the world. And in the UK context, I mean, that's one example. We've seen firms collaborate in the private capital context. A and B Capital and one of the counterparts in the UK have built a partnership to invest into growth stage enterprises. We're seeing some developments in the insurance sector. So you could extrapolate the financial services sector out somewhat broadly. On top of all of this, I mean, this is yet another reflection. If we go back to some of the earlier points, there's a changed sentiment in the market, and the UK has had a long-standing relationship with Saudi Arabia in any case. But the improved sentiment, the unique opportunities, and the potential for joint interests is only multiplying with all of the developments taking place, and that's what we've seen this week. One of the interesting relationships that's been established. I mean, you don't typically see the UK as a mining and resources nation per se. We know the UK for financial services and professional services, and even a degree of manufacturing. But there's a very strong critical minerals relationship being established, which has been part of perhaps not the discussions this week, but a few months ago. So there's quite a broad-ranging set of interests that are being developed between the two states, and like with many others, I think this will continue to grow in the coming months.
I don't know if you saw it, but Stephen Hitchen has been quite visible on social media the last couple of days because I think there was a clip of him, and we showed a bit of it just before we crossed to you, walking around in Riyadh, I think it was, speaking fluent Arabic, and that I think has wowed quite a lot of people. I think he was previously ambassador in Iraq, so he had a bit of a head start by the looks of things, Ali.
He certainly seems to have the energy and the pizzazz for a place like Saudi Arabia, and to fly the flag not only on one side but also the other and bring people together. So we hope that will be the case, and all the best of luck to him and his counterparts.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll be back with you in just a moment. Thanks, Ali. Now, the Global Water Expo has just wrapped up in Riyadh. Well, that three-day event brought together some 300 exhibitors from more than 25 countries, offering an opportunity for new technology to be showcased and for knowledge to be exchanged. Well, sustainable water infrastructure is a key element of Vision 2030. And with that in mind, the National Water Company has announced 30 new water and sewage projects across Riyadh, valued at more than $500 million. Ali, thanks for standing by there. I mean, worth remembering when we talk about water in the context of Saudi Arabia. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the country doesn't have any permanent year-round natural rivers or lakes, and it's obviously got very low rainfall as a country. And, clearly that represents a pretty major challenge, doesn't it, for this scarce natural resource?
Of course, without water, Tom, you can't scale industry, you can't scale food production, you can't scale urbanization. So, you know, as we've seen across the many different aspects of society and industry that are being developed in Saudi Arabia, the nation has taken due care to consider the different challenges and shortfalls. And there are some really interesting developments underway. I mean, this has been an interesting event. I haven't had the opportunity to attend the expo, but it's brought together a sizable pool of delegates. But there's some very interesting pieces of work taking place in the likes of Inoa, for example, out of NEOM, which is quite heavily focused on innovating for water sustainability and sustainability in the use of other resources. And NEOM is quite a hotbed for innovation and experimentation, given it's a city that's being built truly from a blank piece of paper. But we will continue to see, as with many other developments, particular innovation in this area. But it is actually it's a significant area of focus within the national strategy. So it's really refreshing to see all these people come together and work together to solve this problem.
And obviously, desalination is something that, not just Saudi Arabia, but quite a lot of countries in the Gulf region have really got good at, isn't it? I mean, it's clearly been a major priority, and I'm assuming, I'd love to get your opinion. I mean, it must be a key factor behind how so many countries in this region have thrived in what would otherwise be pretty arid conditions.
Well, I mean, of course, it's the region is essentially a desert. So when you consider where the level of development is now and how cities are thriving and how urban infrastructure is being developed, and the sheer increase in population, the number of tourists that come through, naturally, I mean, it's not a nice to have, it's a necessity. So innovation can be born out of two things, I believe, either vision or an ambition for a bigger future, or necessity. And in this case, I think it's both. So you've got the right ingredients for people to come together and solve the problem.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Ali Raza, Chief Investment Officer at Haytham and Company. Thank you for your contribution today. Well, thank you for watching The Riyal Deal here on Al Arabiya English. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Do stay tuned, meanwhile, to our channel.